Okay, perfect. All right, so before we start, I just need you to state your name and the years you attended Westchester.
Gotcha. I am John Kapell. Last name is Kapell, in case you're going to edit that out later. I attended Westchester University from 1991 until 1995. I was a 4.5-year student, so graduated in December of 1995.
Awesome, perfect. So what did you study while you were at Westchester?
My undergraduate degree, which I will say I declared when I became a senior because I A, didn't know what I wanted to do, and B, didn't have the grades good enough to declare a major until that point because I was not always focused on my academics. I eventually became a communication studies major. So I graduated with comm studies and truly have used every bit of that in my work ever since I left Westchester University.
Perfect. So what made you choose communications?
Initially, I was set out to try and become a business major, and then it dawned on me that the math and numbers did not work for me, and I couldn't work with them. So I realized that I could talk and I could communicate, and I had no fears about standing in front of a crowd of 1,000 people and having a conversation or leading a discussion or a dialogue. And comm studies just kind of fell into my lap. And at the time, I believe Laura Cleansing was one of my peers at the university, and her father was the chair of the communication department. So I was kind of like, oh, you're doing comm studies. Your dad's in charge of it. That sounds interesting.
Nice. Yeah. How about what made you come to Westchester of all places?
All right. So when I was a senior in high school, I attended Manheim Township High School in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And my mother and I did a drive around the state. I was set that I was going to be staying in the state of North Carolina, state of Pennsylvania, because I wanted to keep in-state tuition, keep things affordable. State institutions seemed to make the most sense to me just because I wasn't sure if college was what I really wanted to do. So I looked at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I looked at, I think, Lock Haven. When I drove onto, I think it was High Street, we came down the road and it was just tree lined and gorgeous as it came onto the campus. And at that moment, I just said to myself, Westchester looks to be an absolutely amazing place. And I really enjoyed the way it looked and the way it felt to me. So then I applied to Westchester and I got into 2 or 3 schools, and Westchester became the place where ultimately I chose to go and stay.
And to this day, it's still like literally the same reason why I came here too.
That's
Besides
fantastic.
the education program. But
Yep.
yeah, no.
Serpentine, the stones that are serpentine with a green hue to them is kind of legendary.
Yeah.
There's some really the Whispering Arches, in case unless you're not familiar with the Whispering Arches
Oh, of course.
at Phillips Auditorium. There's just a lot of great things about Westchester that I think really just made sense. And when I got to Westchester and I became a freshman, I joined a fraternity right off the bat. I was pledging my freshman year, although I never thought I would. Joined Kappa Delta Rho, got to know Charlie Warner, who was the fraternity and sorority life oversight person. Diane DeVestern was I think the assistant vice president of student affairs. So I knew her for many, many years. So faculty and staff really became known to us. Pete Galloway, Dawn was another person I met in housing. So just it felt like a great place to be.
Nice. So how did you feel about your decision going to Westchester?
I loved it.
Especially since you said that you use your communication degree all the time.
Yeah, I loved it. Honestly, Westchester was just a really comfortable place. At that time, I don't think I realized it was 14,000 students when I went, which nowadays feels like a medium to larger size institution, but it felt much smaller. Being part of the Greek community really helped me connect and get to know other folks. Being a student leader on campus was integral in my experience. When I became a sophomore, I became the Inter-Greek Council treasurer and started getting to know administrators, and then got involved. And at that time, Psych Student Union was being built. So we ended up using, I can't remember exactly which residence hall it was, but once I found it, I'd tell you. But I ended up using that as a temporary space, and just being able to be a leader was amazing. And taking what I learned academically, I could still tell you some of my core faculty. And in fact, in the work that I do working in higher education, I've used some examples of things that I learned in class. Especially my intercultural communications class. I'm blanking on her name right now, but the instructor of the class actually came to my university at UNC Wilmington when I was there, Dr. Anita Foman. And I walked in and I was like, Dr. Foman, you're not going to remember me, but I had you for class 20 some years ago. And she just was like, I can't believe you remember. Like, your class was a class I will never forget. She brought us up in the front of class, and because it was intercultural communication, she would say, okay, so I want the men to stand up here. Straight men, come up here and be on the panel. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Okay, students who are identifying as Black, African American, I need you up here. LGBTQI. And she had every population of student within the class serve as the representative and panel conversationalist so that we could ask her questions. And I think that really helped me begin to understand that not everybody is white, not everybody it looks like me, and really helped start my understanding of intersectionalities, even though that term didn't become popular until later on. Dr. Remlin, who taught, I think it was our nonverbal communication classes, just really had some really wonderful experiences with that. My academic advisor, Diane Casagran, she ended up passing away several years ago, but she actually taught a course for me that I took, a 15-week class on parliamentary procedure, and absolutely, I thought it was phenomenal. And I have been a student government advisor for 17 years in my professional career, and what I learned in that class related to those 17 years of advising student government. So it really, the lessons that I learned from West Chester University have stayed with me for my entirety of my life.
Amazing. Honestly, that's awesome. What about where'd you live? Where do you live on campus, off campus, commuter?
So when I was a student, my freshman year, I lived in, was it Killinger Hall, which was a 24-hour quiet hall, which was probably the worst possible decision for me because I'm a consummate extrovert. I was on housing probation 11 days into college. I had been written up 3 times in my first 11 days. The third time was because I was laughing too loud. The other times I was just, we were first east in Killinger Hall. Our RA's name was Dave Cosby, and we called ourselves the Cosby Kids and nicknamed ourselves Worst East because we were just, you put a bunch of extroverts in a 24-hour quiet hall. And I met this guy at orientation, Ben Willis, and Ben was like, as a freshman, hey, I don't know anybody, you want to be roommates at orientation? I'm like, sure, let's be roommates. Didn't realize he was pre-med, and pre-med meant that we were going to live in a 24-hour quiet hall, which bad idea for me. So Ben later actually dropped out, transferred to a school in Exeter, Pennsylvania, and became a police officer, which I'm like, thanks, man. You got me stuck in a 24-hour quiet hall, which I was on housing probation 11 days in. So when I tried to become an RA, they were like, nice try, kid. You've been written up too many times. My sophomore year, I lived in Goshen Hall, which I understand has been torn down. And honestly, in Goshen Hall, I lived on like the 2nd or 3rd floor. And then I realized the benefits of a 24-hour quiet hall because the bass and the music started thumping at 10 a.m. And at 11 o'clock at night, it got turned off. So if I wanted to study, I didn't do that in Goshen Hall. And it was just kind of crazy. So my junior year, I think I lived in the fraternity house my junior year on High Street, Kappa Delta Rho's old house. Then I moved into an apartment with 3 fraternity brothers just down the road, actually across from Phi Sigma Sigma's sorority house. So I was constantly in their house. And then my senior and a half year, I moved into an apartment owned by Jane Ennis, because all these names all stick in my head. I've talking about 20-some years. She owned a house directly beside the Kappa Delta fraternity house. So I had the benefits of the fraternity house without having to live in the fraternity house. So, and after Westchester, I moved to Delaware to work for MBNA, which is our credit card company, which became Wachovia, which then became Bank of America. And after about a year doing that, I went to graduate school to get my master's degree in Human Services Administration. And then I worked for UMass Amherst in Massachusetts, then Philadelphia for 6 years, moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, lived on the coast, got my doctoral degree in 2017, and now I'm living here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was hired to be the assistant dean of campus life to run involvement engagement for an HBCU. And after about a year, they said, hey, we've got a gap in our other office and we need you to fill in double duty. Can you be our assistant dean of students as well? So I've been doing that for the past 5.5 months in addition to my other duties. So it's been pretty active. And Winston-Salem State is part of the 17 school system, North Carolina state system, one of about 3 different HBCUs, and our student population is around 5,000 students. So still kind of keep myself active and busy.
Yeah, very busy. Well, okay, so well, you already kind of answered this, but so what'd you do for fun on campus, off campus? Obviously, you were in fraternity.
Admin a fraternity, so Kappa Delta Rho, Inter-Greek Council, being a comm studies major, we just started to get to know people. And because of my work as Inter-Greek Council, I got to know fraternity and sorority members from other chapters. So it wasn't just Kappa Delta Rho. When I became the Interfraternity Council president, I started running for that role. And I said, hey, Kevin Hernenko from Sigma Pi, I want you to run for my VP of recruitment. Hey, Tim Wilkinson, I want you to run for secretary. And I started handpicking folks that I thought would be good in those roles. And all of them got elected. So here I was working around a bunch of people that I knew, but weren't my fraternity brothers, but became part of my community. And so I spent a lot of time doing Greek life on campus when I wasn't working for a TGI Friday. And I worked on Concord Ave and down in Wilmington, then moved to Newcastle, and I was a line cook. I waited tables and I started bartending. So I was working, I would leave campus by about 4 o'clock on a Friday, and I would be at work by 5 until about 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd get up the next day and I would do either a swing shift or work all day, but I'd work from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. at TGI Fridays. And then the next day I'd get up and I would go back to work and open the restaurant at 7 a.m. and I'd work till about 2 or 3, and then I'd come home. So weekends for me was all about work, but I also did it that way so that I wasn't working Monday through Thursday. So that way I could be involved on campus. So, I'd gone to a couple of events and activities. At one point I was asked to be a leader in what was called CHAOS, which was the Commuter and Off-Campus Student Association, something like that, just to kind of help commuter students feel connected with the campus. I was a regular frequent flyer in the student affairs office for good stuff. I was just trying to be as involved as possible. I remember I got as the IFC president, I went to the borough of Westchester and actually advocated for the expansion of size of fraternity letters on fraternity houses. And that was my first foray into government politics, which who knew that was going to kind of shape how I interacted with folks. And that's where I first learned the word aesthetics. And I was like, oh, they're talking about aesthetics. Let me look this up real quick. And suddenly that became my word of, it's not going to damage the aesthetics. In fact, it will positively enhance the way that the community lives and looks. So fun-wise, that was kind of what I did for fun when I was in college. I mean, between work, classes, group projects, and waiting tables, bartending, and cooking, there wasn't a whole lot of time for other things. But I will say, because I was waiting tables and bartending, I was generally walking out of there with $100 to $200 in cash in my pocket at the end of every night. So when I decided it was like, let's go to the bar, let's go to either 21 North, let's go to the Rat, I was the guy buying drinks. I mean, hell, Jake's Bar, 50-cent drafts on Matlack Street was a staple for us.
That's the funny thing. Yeah, Jake's has not changed since the 70s.
Nope.
And I think the only thing that has changed is beers are now $1.
Oh my God, they're so expensive. Honestly, Dwayne was the bartender back in those days, and if you did not tip Dwayne from the first drink you got, you didn't get a second drink.
He still is the bartender.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh my God, Dwayne was like somebody. The story I heard once was somebody once asked Dwayne for a mixed drink, and he asked him where they got it last. He was like, I got the Rat. He goes, go back to the Rat. And then I think the next time someone's like kind of start haggling him and said, well, why don't you whip out that blender and make me a frozen drink? And Dwayne apparently made an announcement to the bar and said, y'all, I'm not serving another drink till this a-hole gets out of here. And that guy had to leave because no one else was getting served until they left.
He's still the same old guy.
And there was a guy, he was in a fraternity and I can't remember his name. He was the bouncer there, and then he became bartender there too at one point. So the last time I was in there, maybe 10 years ago, he was still working there, which, hey, Jake's Bar was an institution. I still literally, one of my lounge t-shirts is a Jake's Bar t-shirt from 1995.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yep. It's getting a Jake's t-shirt was also legendary. And when I come up there at the end of April to connect with fraternity brothers and do the event for Dr. Marbuck, I guarantee we're going to make a trip by Jake's.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cause back in those days, it served, I think it was Busch Light, Busch Ice, and Coors Light.
Coors Light is still what they got. They got a Coors Light, or they also have White Claw.
Oh, really? Well, they upgraded the White Claw because Dwayne sure wasn't going to do that 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah. So it's usually get one or the other. Pitcher is $6
Okay, pitchers back then, I think a mug of wine was $4, if I remember way back in the day. And then pitchers, because I remember I had a night class, a 3-hour night class, 7 to 10 p.m. And I was in the bar one night grabbing lunch or dinner or whatever with somebody to have like, let's have a drink before we go to class. And there was a couple of Sigma Phi Epsilon guys behind us on the shuffleboard table. And it was, and Sigma Phi Epsilon and KDRs, we did not get along. There was just general animosity. Like we did not like each other for no other reason, the fact that we're stupid. So I ordered a pitcher and I turned around and I walked over and I sat it right in the middle of the table in front of the guys. And I was like, gentlemen, have a beer. Suddenly we became the best friends. And I maintained contact with those guys for years, because suddenly it was like barriers are broken. We just started drinking together and that's all it took.
It's simple as that.
Yep, simple as that. God, I sound like an alcoholic, but believe me, I'm definitely not.
I swear.
I swear. They go to meetings, I don't. And that's, Jake's Bar, my fraternity had a saying about Jake's Bar, which was you stood up and you got drunk. And because until you stood up, you were fine. Because at 50-cent drafts, you just kept drinking. And I will say I have a mug from Jake's from 25 or 30 years ago in my garage. But it was like a 10-ounce pour and you drank, and all of a sudden you're like, I go to the bathroom, you stood up and you're like, whoa, when did I get drunk? Okay. So the saying was, you're fine. You stood up and you got drunk. Until you stood up, you were fine.
It's a good one. That's a good one. All right. So okay. So your bar nights were what? Probably Thursday nights?
Honestly, when I was in my half semester senior year, I was out like 5 nights a week. But for me, Thursday nights were the big night, because some places did like nickel drafts. And honestly, I think the one that sticks out to me the most about the Rat, and this may be a question you're to ask, is they used to do a wing night. And they would sell wings for 10 cents a piece. And I think it was like Monday or Thursday, because every bar had a special. And I think Jake's Bar was a Monday night, because it was football night too. And you'd walk in and it was like, A, good luck getting a place to sit, and B, good luck getting an order of wings in like half an hour to an hour. So what I would do is, Drea was this girl that we knew in college. She was a waitress there, but she was also a fellow student. Me and a couple of fraternity brothers would walk in. And again, I walked out with $100, $200 in cash in my hand every single week, saying you paid for your food separate from you paid from your alcohol at Jake's. And I will talk about a guy named Eric Broadway in a second. But at Jake's, Drea would come up and she'd be like, hey, John, I'm like, give me a table, will you? And she's like, okay. She'd find a table for us. And I'd hand her a 20 and I'm like, give me 100 wings, keep the change. So the wings were $10. Her tip was $10. And next thing you know, within 15 minutes, we had 100 wings sitting in front of us.
Perfect.
And it was just like, Drea, we're going to take care of you, take care of us. And then they would probably do like quarter drafts on those nights as well. So I was drinking 3-4 beers, but we were sitting there eating 100 wings between 3 or 4 of us. Now, granted, these wings were not the wings of today. These were like little tiny bones, but getting 100 wings when somebody else was in their table over waiting 30 minutes, and Drea's like, here, John, here's your wings. I'm like, thanks, man. So it just worked out totally to our advantage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Drea was our gateway, and just give her a $20 bill and say 100 wings and the rest is yours, and she'd be like, done.
Perfect. So okay, so shifting over here to the Rat.
Yes.
So Thursday night, you're
Yes.
going out with buddies. You get to the Rat, what do you see? Is there a line?
You know what? So you're Alex, I'm gonna pick on your generation. You all go out at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. We were out by 7. So, we started early and we went till midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning. And some of my fraternity brothers would get home at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I don't know how y'all are doing this. So I was generally out between 7 and 8 o'clock to get to a bar, because I knew from working in a bar, unless you got there early, you weren't getting a place to sit. And Jake's Bar, being as tiny as it was, it's like I had 20 seats in it. Either you got there and got a seat or you were screwed. So I get there 7, 8 o'clock at night. There was no line, but at 10 o'clock at night, if you looked over, the Rat had a downstairs area with a dance floor. There was always a line for that.
Okay, so then, well, how about once you got inside?
Yes.
Give me a
Lay
your
of the
best.
land.
Yeah, lay of the
So
land.
you had this, you had the posted, not the posted, you had the center bar when you walk into Jake's bar. Like it was just this big area in there. When I was getting towards a senior, this guy named Eric Broadway, who was a fraternity brother of mine from KDR, he had failed out of college. As we kind of joked with him, he majored in PlayStation. So he spent all his time playing. And he even said it was just like, look, I'm not meant for college, but I like the college environment. And Eric Broadway was like this 6'2", just like brick wall of muscle. So it was phenomenal. I mean, he'd be like, you got your drinks first. He'd take care of you. So you'd have people always sitting at the bar, always hanging out. You had behind the bar area was the kitchen area, and between the kitchen and the bar were all these different seats where people were eating and drinking and having a good time. So I went to the dance floor probably twice in my entire year because I was like, back in those days, I was a fat kid and I was like, I am not shaking what I got in a dance floor because nobody needs to see that happening and I'm not picking anybody up anyway. So my whole thing was, I got money, I'm going to sit at the bar, I'm going to buy drinks and I'm going to hang out. That was kind of my deal. I remember taking out Eric Tobias, otherwise known as Sprout. He was a guy who was in, oh God, I can't remember what fraternity, Zeta Beta Tau. He was in ZBT. And his fraternity brothers didn't even take him out for his birthday. So me and a guy from Sig Pi, Kevin Hernenko, we took him out and got him drunk on his 21st birthday. It was like, that, just like those are the friends that we had. So we ended up taking him to the Rat. I think he got like 12 shots in and he was like, we're like, we'll take you home now. Because he was maybe 5'2", 5'4", thus his nickname Sprout.
12 shots.
Basically is about as far as he made it, yes.
I don't think I could make it past like 7.
I can't make it. You know what? As you learn as you get older, it's like you don't wanna, because I mean, and you're probably like 21, 22 years old.
22.
Yeah, I just turned 50 this past year, and yes, I can drink, but Lord, it is not worth it. I'm gonna get up tomorrow morning and go run between 8 and 10 miles with my running club, and nobody needs to be hungover for any part of that. So, and then you enjoy your 20s. When you hit 30, things hurt a little bit. When you hit 40, things hurt more. And I realized when you turn 50, things hurt and you don't even know why. And you had a place to hurt like that.
So okay, so what about okay, so you described the downstairs to me. Or well, okay, well hold up. So there was 2 bars. There was the upstairs and the downstairs, right?
Yep, I think there was a bar downstairs, which again, I didn't spend a lot of time with. That was just not my environment. Like I got down there 2 whole times and it was like, and probably by the time I made it down there, I was so drunk I couldn't tell you a whole lot about it other than loud, obnoxious music and women. Okay, so here's when I became a senior, women started wearing lower bearing shirts, if you will. Up until that point, and Alex, this is sorry, I'm gonna date myself. I thought a woman was attractive in college if you wore sweatpants, sweatshirt, and a baseball hat with her ponytail through the back of the baseball hat. That was considered hot back in those days because I work on a college campus and I see more flesh than I ever wanted to. You didn't see that back in the 90s on a college campus.
Right. There's a lot of baggy stuff.
A lot of baggy stuff. So when one time I went to the dance floor, I was like, girls wearing midriff shirts. I was like, what is this madness?
What is going on?
I was like, this is crazy. And again, when I graduated college, I probably weighed 220, 230 pounds. So I'm now at about 180. So it was a very different life for me way back in those days.
Gotcha. Okay, so you spent most of your time at the upstairs bar.
Yeah.
What kind of music do they have there? Did they still do a lot of like live music, that kind of stuff?
There was no live music when I was in college.
Really?
I think it was straight up. You had a DJ. I remember walking in, and when you got your ID checked, there was a bouncer who had this massive key ring of all of the fake IDs they had captured and punched a hole on, and it was hanging on a hook by the door. Kind of a, hey, if you've got a fake, we're going to find that out pretty fast.
Yeah, that is the one thing that I've in my research, I've found that the rat was pretty strict with the fake IDs and that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah, when I was a senior in high school, I knew a couple bars in my hometown that I could go to because I looked old enough. But when I got to the rat, I was like, people were like, I got a fake ID. I was like, yeah, let me know how that goes in the morning. And we didn't have cell phones at that time either. I mean, remember when I was graduating as a senior, whoever was a student body president at the time I knew, he's like, I just got a cell phone. I'm like, why are you getting one of those? They're never gonna last. What the hell did I know? But they were strict on IDs, and they were really strict. They weren't playing games when it came to fakes at the rat.
I like yeah. There's I had one. I don't know if maybe you've heard about this. So it happened in 1988. So a little before you, but it was like a police raid. Like 30 something police officers went into the rat trying to bust kids for like underage drinking, and like a bunch of kids got arrested. Um, I don't know. Have you heard anything
I
about that?
had heard about it when college. It was kind of one of those urban legends, like the police will raid, and I was also like, I'm freaking terrified.
Yeah.
And so, but also for me, it was when I turned 21, I actually was working on my 21st birthday at the TGI Fridays in Concord. And my manager, Tom Galzinski at the time, pulled me over to the bar. He's like, yo, Kapell, get over here. I'm like, what up? He goes, hands me a shot of tequila, says, all right, take a shot. All right, go back to work. I'm like, okay, thanks. I mean, which was totally illegal to do that. But, I was working. And for me, I was also raised in a family that you worked your butt off because my parents paid for my college, my parents paid for my rent. Anything else I wanted, I had to pay for myself.
Yeah.
So, I worked, and I was not upset to work. I missed out on a lot of weekend activities. But I honestly, my senior year as a senior and a half, I was out 5 nights a week, whether it was Jake's, the Rat, 21 North, who knows, whoever's running a bar special, I was there.
Nice. So at least you got to make up for all that lost time.
I tried. Yeah.
What about so those wings you were talking about, was that Jake's or was that at the Red?
That was the Rat. Oh,
Okay.
Jake's served bags of chips, which to this day I have never eaten a bag of chips at Jake's. But the Rat actually had like a full menu. They would do sandwiches. I would pop in there at 12 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, go get lunch with my fraternity brother, Mike Poncell. Mike and I would grab a beer and a sandwich. Eric Broadway was bartending. We'd hang out, have a drink, and then I'd go to my last class for the day. So Jake's became like, it wasn't just nighttime. Like they were open during the daytime, and there'd be people in there grabbing lunch. Students would grab lunch and a beer, and then we just go to class.
Cool. So from that, I'm guessing that how was the food? Was it all right, or
It was your standard run-of-the-mill bar food, and as a college student, it was fantastic. And then realize when you actually eat places and refine your palate, you're like, I'm never gonna eat that kind of crap food again. I mean, is Little Man's Deli still there?
no? Right next door to Jake's.
Yeah.
No, now it's a pizza place.
All right. So Little Man's Deli did serve pizza. And at 2 a.m., holy crap, Alex, that was the best pizza you have ever eaten in your entire damn life. At 2 a.m. drunk, that was phenomenal pizza. I made the mistake one day. They had a $5 pizza special. I bought a pizza for $5 one Monday or something like that, and brought it back to the apartment where I was staying with the summertime. And I took a bite. And I was like, this is the worst thing I've eaten my entire life. Like I was stone cold sober. I'm like, this food is disgusting.
Ruined it.
It ruined it completely. So yeah, the food at Jake's was your standard run-of-the-mill fries and sandwiches, probably had burgers and their wing special.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I kind of like expected it to be like that kind of, well, exactly like you said. Like you only kind of get it. Like it's amazing 2 a.m. whatever when you're drunk, but like besides that, but yeah, so like people actually went there to grab a bite like between classes, whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't packed, but it was one of those situations like I need a quick bite to eat. I don't feel like walking back to the fraternity house, or I don't want to go to the dining hall right now. I mean, and the dining hall, in my opinion, did a really good job. I really enjoy the dining complex. I don't know if it's changed. It probably has changed since, but you know, the dining hall was all you could eat, and I did. That's why I put in 40 pounds my freshman year. Literally, I bloated. I get back and people are like, "What the hell happened to you?" I'm like, "Oh, you could eat at college." Like, yeah, that explains things.
Dining hall.
But the food was, I mean, it was decent. I mean, if you want fries, you had fries. Well, you get wings and fries, or you get a sandwich and fries, and you were happy as a college student.
Nice. Yeah, no, yeah. Anyway, going back a little bit. So
Yeah.
what about you said um the music? What kind of music do they play?
God, it was whatever was popular at the time, and it felt like it was almost a club mix. If I can recall correctly, it's like when the door opened for the downstairs area, you heard like a club dance beat. Um, and then on the upper level, it was just your standard pop, whatever popular music. I mean, shit, back in those days, Nirvana was all over the radio. So you're probably we were listening to grunge more often than not.
I do remember like yeah, my mom and dad have like they've always talked about like oh like going to the bars in the 90s and like my mom hates Smells Like Teen Spirit because like all of her like guy friends would just start like body slamming each other or
Oh
something
yeah, it
like
was total mosh music. Oh my God, yeah. Between that and Bush, with God, and actually it's funny because my personal playlist has a lot of my music from the 90s on it. And Glycerine was a song by Bush, which was really popular at the time. And there's still a lot, like my one of my roommates, and he was a fraternity brother, and one of my pledge brothers, all the same person, Mark Mayer. Mark was, or we called him Rusty because he had red hair. Rusty, um, he was my gateway person for music. Like he knew every new upcoming band. So I would take his tapes because we had tapes, and I would dub the tape. And then when CDs became popular, I'm like, I would burn a copy of the CD. We didn't have digital music at that point. So I was making CDs, and now I took every single CD I have and I burned it to my hard drive. So I've got like all the external drives of my music on it. And I load my phone with my playlist, and most of it's my grunge stuff of either Nirvana or Bush. God, who did the lead singer, Stone Temple Pilots. Yes, all I could go back through my music records, hell, my CD list, and kind of give you all those. So yes, mostly grunge. That was a very long answer to your very simple question.
no. Very cool, very cool. So what about drinks? So you get there, what's the first thing you order?
Beer. That's all I drank.
Beer?
I drank beer. We get beer in shots. There was the whole three wise men idea, which was old granddad and something. I can't remember what the three shots were, but we every once in a while we try and get fancy like kamikazes, and if it was someone's 21st birthday, we were buying kamikazes. You never bought someone a blowjob shot. That just was, you know, such a homophobic era of that generation. Um, yeah, it was that or vodka shots until I got sick one night on vodka, and I was like, I can't do that anymore. And so beer. I mean, and back in those days, the ice beers became popular. So Jenny Ice, Bush Ice, Bud Light Ice, those were like the high gravity beers of today's market. Otherwise, you know, back in those days, you had Budweiser, you had Miller High Life, you had Old Milwaukee. Schlitz was my fraternity beer for the longest time. And then they switched, I think, to Natural Light, and I was like, what happened to Schlitz? Like, Schlitz was good. National Bohemian. So I mean, it's PBR hadn't even made a surge at that point. So we drank whatever was on tap, and typically it was Coors Light, Bush Light. Yeah.
Nice. What I actually want to touch on, so I don't know if you got this from I don't know your time there, but so I've read some articles more later, like closer to like early 2000s, about like protests about the rat being like a homophobic establishment.
I do remember hearing that afterwards. I wasn't when I was in college. But honestly, I remember living in, I think it was Killinger Hall, and one of the guys who lived in the hall, who was a junior or senior, and I always thought that was weird. I'm like, you're living in a 24-hour quiet hall and you're a senior, why wouldn't you move off campus? But he was like, I'm gonna stay on campus because it's easy. I was like, that's fine. And in retrospect, I like when my students stay all 4 years on college, on a campus. He said to me, he's like, I'm not going to that because it's a homophobic environment and guys can't dance together. And it was like, okay. And that for me was kind of a coming of age time, because when I first entered college, I was convinced in my own mind that homosexuality was evil and being gay was terrible and you shouldn't do that. And then around my junior year, I started making friends with some people, and I was like, wait, but you're cool and you're gay, so that doesn't equate in my head. So the amount of emotional growth for me was like, okay, so people who are gay aren't evil, and fighting everything that I thought I knew, to now being fast forward, I'm an LGBTQIA ally. I developed an ally program for Drexel University. I work there, so a lot of my work is in that environment. But I remember him saying that the Rat was a homophobic area, and that's why he wasn't going to go there. But there were no protests when I was there. But I do know some people who wouldn't go there because it was perceived that it was anti-gay.
Okay. Because yeah, all right. Just so I read some articles that said with stuff like problems with like bouncers. Yeah, like exactly like you said, like guys getting kicked out for dancing with each other,
Yeah,
even if like they weren't gay. But
exactly. And I can say that the machismo era, that was probably pretty common. That because societally it's okay for two women to be gay because that's hot versus two guys because that's gross. So, and I think that really kind of stemmed that area. I remember I worked for UMass after grad school, and I had got my first HIV test, and I remember just like being terrified, but that was also following the idea that only gay men got AIDS. So kind of ingrained in our brains, because I remember being in college taking a German class and having to engage in conversation, and the instructor, part of it was conversational. She was like, what are you afraid of? What do you fear? I was like, I fear getting AIDS. And she was like, okay. And we talked about that in German, which don't ask me to do now. But I kind of remember that just being a kind of product of the times of AIDS was only for gay people, and then suddenly straight people could get it, and what that was all about. So it doesn't surprise me, the bouncers and the stories you're hearing about the anti-gay movement within the Rat, which I don't know what they ended up with. Anyway, so that's a long way of saying yes, I did hear about that.
okay. All right. So okay. So switching over here. Let's see. What else do I got? How about sorry, going back to food. Was the Papa John's and Burrito Loco there, right? The upstairs? Was that
No. I mean, when I was in college, the Rat was the Rat was the Rat. There was the restaurant in the back area that was part of the Rat. Years afterwards, I had heard that the university had kind of purchased it and made it into a bookstore. But when I was in college, till the time I graduated, there was nothing in the Rat but the Rat itself.
okay. So okay, what about the like the deck? Did they do deck parties? That
Oh
kind of
my
stuff?
God. Alex, I completely forgot about that until you just said that. So the first time I ever went onto the deck was I was an alum. I came back from homecoming probably 2 to 3 years after college, at least. And all of a sudden I'm drinking a beer and I'm like, oh, they opened up the deck area. That wasn't there when I was in college, or at least I didn't know about it in college. So that was the first time I'd get out there, and then I was like walking by it. But that was amazing to see that actually happening.
Yeah, I sadly they don't. Well, it's now the Red is now a Saxby's, and they still have the deck, and you can kind of like go out and like drink coffee, whatever, eat biscuits, or I've actually never been to Saxby's, but
No, Saxby's we have them down here in the South, and they're just pretty much take a piece of bread and soak it in butter and watch your cholesterol rise. But
yeah.
so Jake's is still there. Little Man's became a pizza shop. Is 21 North still around?
Actually no,
Okay.
no. But
What
I have
bars what bars exist in Westchester? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty.
now there's a lot. A lot of them are on Gay Street. Popular ones are there's Barnaby's, just super popular. That's like if you want to go and dance, you go there. Place is huge.
Okay.
Um, so there's Barnaby's, there's Kildare's, which is another kind of like
Irish pub.
dance, yeah, Irish pub dance kind of bar. There's Ryan's Pub, which is another Irish pub, but that one's really popular. It's more smaller, low key.
Okay. Well, what's the bar or brewery restaurant that's on High Street?
There's Iron Hill Brewery.
That's it. Okay. Yeah, the last time I was there, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I think we had dinner at Iron Hill.
Iron Hill is very good.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
a
very
chain. They got some in King of Prussia as well, if I recall.
yes. Yep. Yeah, I mean Jake's is still there. There's also there's a place Sidebar, Jitters.
Jitters. Oh my God. I forgot about Jitters.
Yeah. It's I don't really go there that often. It's a tiny little sports bar. Lots of people love it though.
Yeah, I guarantee when I come here on the 29th, what's going to happen is a bunch of us are going to connect and I'm going to look at Greg Toothaker or my Pledge Brothers and say, for old times, you want to go get a drink at Jake's and I'm staying in Chad's Ford. I got a hotel in Chad's Ford for Saturday night. And I'm already very aware that once I bring my car back to Chad's Ford, I will Uber back to Westchester because I'm smart enough not to do something stupid like DUI it.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's tons of bars in Westchester. So and I luckily live right above well, it's now called Santino's, but on Market Street. But it was called Ram's Head, which is kind of like the ghost of the Rat. But now it's just they only have like a little basement that's called like the Rathskeller, Ram's Head Rathskeller.
Yeah, God, I miss those. Yeah, and I graduated in 1995, so I'm coming up on 30 years since I graduated. And when Charlie Warner, who was the director of Greek Life or student leadership involvement, he called me. He's like, before you see this on Facebook, I need to give you a heads up. And I mean, I hadn't been his student in 25 years. And he wanted to make sure. He's like, I'm making a bunch of phone calls to my former students. And Charlie was there for 30 years of his career, and just him, Galloway, some good folks in there.
All right, so how about you kind of mentioned some specials, like following specials.
Yep.
What kind of drink specials did the Rat run, or just
I'm gonna be
specials?
honest with you. I think they did like a quarter draft night, and that's the only special I really remember, to be honest with you, because people would go to different bars based on the special they had. Like 21 North did like a nickel beer night. It was like $1 to get in, nickel at that point from beers, which I went to a couple of times. I think for me, with the staple was Jake's, because it was 50-cent drafts all time, every time, and they opened at 8 a.m. and closed at 2 a.m. And for me, going to the Rat was a lot about the wings, just because we had a connection, and I drink beer. And for some folks, the Rat was a late night destination where you went, because if you did not make Jake's your late night, because you weren't going to get a seat.
Yeah.
I'm sure that place exceeded fire code more often than not. But the Rat typically was the 25-cent drafts, which was like throw $1 on the bar and say, give me 4 beers, and you got 3 friends with you, and then I'd pay around, someone else would pay around, and by the time we did it, we were 4 beers in, and it cost each of us $1 plus a tip.
Yeah, it's awesome. Can't beat that, really.
No, hell no, can't beat that. Nowadays, hell, with microbrews and breweries, it's $6 to $8 for a pint of beer, and I'm like, I'm happy with that, because I am a working professional and I can afford to pay it, which means my college students are not showing up to the place where I go drink.
Yeah, absolutely. What about themes, like theme nights? Did they ever do anything like that?
I'll be honest with you, I don't recall any theme nights, but the reason is they probably did a theme night on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Fridays and Saturdays I was working.
Yeah, you were.
So I don't, and for me, who I was as a person, I wasn't doing theme nights. That didn't appeal to me.
Yeah. How about did the Red ever host like events of any sort that you can recall?
No, and honestly, if they did, I don't know about. I don't remember those. Nope, I'm useless on that one.
All right. Um, I mean that's pretty much all I have for you. Unless if do you have any fun stories?
Oh my God. I can recall, and more since we're talking about a bar, and that's the theme of it, and realizing this was 35 years ago of my life, or 25 years ago, 28 years ago. We used to go to the Rat, and then when we had some guys in the fraternity that would live down on Matlack Street, and we had guys who lived in High Street, and I remember the reason I didn't live in the fraternity house for more than 1 year is at 2 o'clock in the morning, people came home from the bar drunk off their asses, usually from Jake's or the Rat. And it was like, okay, I don't want to live it like, and that's why when I moved to a different apartment, I was happy to do that. I spent my year in the fraternity house, I did my duty, had my obligation, but I didn't want to be woken up by a bunch of drunk people. But I remember leaving the Rat more than once. And we were just hammered walking towards Matlack Street, and either myself or someone else be like, give me a second, pop behind a dumpster and throw up. And it was like, all right, you good? Yep, let's go. Let's keep drinking. All right. And it was just like the stupid stuff you did in college. If the Rat had sold t-shirts back in those days that were like Jake's Bar t-shirts, back in the day, it was like $3 for a t-shirt. I would have bought one for the Rat. And I'm just looking at the Rat picture, the t-shirt in your background. I'm like, the good old days. But even now, I'm like, I don't know that I would wear the Jake's Bar t-shirt out of the house. Mostly because of the time it's got paint all over it. It's my yard work shirt, or and it was an extra large, and it's like it's like a burlap sack on me as big as it is. And I'm just fortunate my girlfriend hasn't said to me, that shirt needs to be retired. Because she did, I'd be like, honey, this shirt is never going to retire.
Dwayne still sells those shirts. They're like it's like $10 for 3 of them, I think. So it's still pretty.
It's still pretty cheap. You just got to buy a bunch of them, which I get it. Yeah, and I honestly, when I get up there, I lead another t-shirt in my life. I do enough races and 5Ks, things like that. I'm like, I have enough shirts. And working at a university, being at a university, you get more swag and t-shirts than you know what to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, I just recently, I took my summer clothes out of the attic and put the winter clothes up there. And I was like, all right, here are 3 or 4 of my university shirts I'm not touching and I'm not going to wear again. So I'm just going to put these up here and not deal with it. So, yep, that's the life. Are you going to be part of the alumni activities taking place on that final weekend in April?
I'm not sure, actually. I was planning on, I'm probably going home. But what weekend did you say?
That weekend is April 29th and 30th.
Yeah, that weekend, that was the one weekend I was planning on going home this month.
Gotcha. Where's home for you?
Bucks County.
What part?
I live in Richboro or Northampton.
Okay.
So,
Is that close to New Hope?
Yeah. It's like
okay. I did my graduate school work at Rider University in Lawrenceville, so I would take my motorcycle and I would drive down to New Hope just for a day and walk around. It's been many years since I was last there, but I had students when I worked at Drexel who were from Bucks County, and going to Westchester. My grandmother was from Paoli, other grandmother was from Wynwood, so I spent a little bit of time in that area. But
there you go. Yeah.
All right, I've got to run to another meeting because I've got 5 students out there waiting on me. Alex, thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure to talk with you, man.
Thank you so much. I have one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
So if you could choose one word to describe the Red, what would it be?
Unforgettable.
Beautiful. Perfect. Here, let me just stop the recording.